Are you about to be a homeschooling mom of a kindergartner or a 4-year-old that you're ready to start homeschooling? Well, before you go out and buy a bunch of curriculums, you are to stop and listen to this all the way through because you're about to do something wrong. In this episode, we are going to talk about what is developmentally appropriate to do with your children when they are between the ages of 3 and 6 years old. And my friends, I'm going to give you a hint. It doesn't have a lot to do with formal academics and curriculums. Hello, my name is Janae Daniels. I am a wife, a mother of 6, and a former middle school teacher turned homeschool mom. I have kids in their 20s all the way down to elementary age and everything in between. Are you thinking about pulling your kids from the school system like I did, but you are scared to death and don't know what to do next? My friends, I felt the same way, and you have come to the right place. I am here to help your family leave the system so that you can take the hearts and minds of your children back. Y'all, I'm not a young mom anymore. I am about to turn 48 years old. And I have been through diapers, and I've been through teenage years, and I've been through all of the developmental ages of kids into adulthood now. And I regularly see on Facebook young moms post in homeschooling Facebook pages, what curriculums should I do for my 3-year-old? What curriculums are best for my 5-year-old? What curriculum should I buy for my 4-year-old? Because I want them to get ahead in life. And then I see myriads of comments from other young moms giving advice. Well, let me tell you something, friends. It's like the blind leading the blind. Y'all, you don't have any idea. And as an older mom, that might sound really harsh, but as an older mom, I've been through the ringers. I've been there. I've done that. And today I want to talk with you about what you should be doing, as well as the research about early curriculum and early formal instruction for children. So, and then we're going to discuss what should you be doing with your sweet little cherubs that are between the ages of 3 and 6. That's what we're going to talk about. And it doesn't involve a lot of formal curriculum. So let's start out with a study done by the Cambridge University. Here we go. In England, children now start formal schooling and the formal teaching of literacy and numeracy at the age of 4. A recent letter signed by around 130 early childhood education experts, including myself, published in the Daily Telegraph, advocated an extension of informal, play-based preschool provision and a delay to the start of formal schooling in England from the current effective start date until the age of 7, in line with a number of other European countries who currently have higher levels of academic achievement and child well-being. Okay, by the way, this study came out in 2013, and yet so much of it was just ignored in the West, even though the research is there, they know what's best for kids, and it's not a pushing of early academics. But yet we, especially in the United States, still push early academics. Now, Denmark has some of the highest ratings for children in as far as all of their testing and everything that they do internationally to find out who's ahead and who are the smartest kids in the world. And Denmark doesn't even start formal education until 6. Right? And even then, I'll pull it up. This is from Denmark's website. Even then, at age 6, Danish children begin their formal schooling. The educational approach in Denmark avoids class rankings and formal tests. Instead, children work in groups and are taught to challenge the established way of doing things. Okay, so Denmark doesn't even start till later. Other European countries start at 7. And yet in the United States, we're like 5 years old. Let's shove them into school for 8 hours a day. Okay, so as homeschooling moms, you shouldn't follow suit. It is not good for them. And so he goes on. And this is David Whitebread. He's an educational expert. He goes on, in my own area of experimental and developmental psychology, studies have also consistently demonstrated the superior learning and motivation arising from playful as opposed to instructional approaches to learning in children. Pretense play supports children's early development of symbolic representational skills, including those of literacy, more powerfully than direct instruction. Physical, constructional, and social play supports children in developing their skills of intellectual and emotional self-regulation, skills which have been shown to be crucial in early learning and development. Perhaps most worrying, a number of studies have documented the loss of play opportunities for children over the second half of the 20th century and demonstrated a clear link with increased indicators of stress and mental health problems. Okay, then he goes on and talks about this, which I found super fascinating. Studies have compared groups of children in New Zealand who started formal literacy lessons at ages 5 and 7. Their results show that early introduction of formal learning approaches to literacy does not improve children's reading development and may be damaging. By the age of 11, there was no difference in reading ability level between the two groups, but the children who started at 5 developed less positive attitudes to reading and showed poorer text comprehension than those children who had started later. In a separate study of reading achievement in 15-year-olds across 55 countries, researchers showed that there was no significant association between reading achievement and school entry age. Okay. There we have it. Why do we push academics so early? My young friends, my young moms who want to do what's right for your kids, let's talk about what you need to do, okay? Now, I know some of you are like, but my child wants to learn to read. Great. Okay, fine. Do a phonics program for 5 minutes a day and call it good, and then let them play. So let's talk about the 2 things that you do need to do, okay? There are 2 things that you should be doing with your children between the ages of 3 and 6 years old. 2, and only 2, and they're very simple. The first thing that you need to be doing with your kids is read to them, read to them, read to them, read to them, read to them. Did you hear me? Read to them. That's the first thing. Now, let's talk about why we want to read to them. Here we go. This is from Free to Learn. Oh, excuse me. That's the next thing. This is from The Enchanted Hour by Megan Cox-Gurdon. And she says this: early experiences and the firing and wiring of neurons create the architecture of a small child's mind, laying the pathways for future thought and reasoning. Reading storybooks turns out to be an extraordinarily efficient and productive way to cause messages to zing from one part of the brain to another, creating and reinforcing those important neural connections. Reading aloud is so constructive in this regard, in fact, that in 2014, the American Academy of Pediatrics advised its 62,000 member doctors to recommend daily reading aloud to the parents and children they see in their medical practices. Reading regularly with young children, the group's policy paper read, stimulates optimal patterns of brain development and strengthens parent-child relationships at a critical time in child development, which in turn builds language, literacy, and social-emotional skills that last a lifetime. Optimal patterns of brain development, stronger parent-child relationships. Wow. Skills that last a lifetime? If reading aloud were a pill, every child in the country would get a prescription. Okay, she then goes on to say, the evidence shows, Swift had said, that the difference between children who get bedtime stories and those who don't, the difference in their life chances is bigger than the difference between those who get elite private schooling and those that don't. Okay, so she argues in this book, and I'll put a link to the book in the show notes, in The Enchanted Hour, that children do better by being read to. Did you hear that? Reading to your children has tremendous effects. Now, I have done a couple different podcast episodes on reading aloud, and the research behind reading aloud to children is astounding. It puts them face to face with greatness. It helps them with their moral compasses. It increases their compassion and empathy for people. I mean, it's astounding. It also helps them decode words, and it helps them to learn to read faster, even though they're not actually doing the reading themselves. And it's phenomenal. And then when you have a child in your lap and you're reading aloud to them, or they're sitting next to you, or you have your few children and you're reading these beautiful picture books, they're also getting art galleries right in front of them. And it allows their imaginations to soar She goes on in the Enchanted Hour to talk about some brain studies that are done where how the brain lights up when children are read to versus when they're stuck in front of a screen, and how the brain almost goes dead, and how it totally lights up the whole brain when they're read to. There is seriously nothing more powerful than you can do with your children. Number one being getting them snuggling next to you and then reading to them, and then reading some more, and then reading more and more picture books. And then as they get a little bit older, reading chapter books to them and continuing to read to them and continuing to read to them. So that first thing, my young friends, that you need to do with those babies is read to them. There will be nothing more powerful. There will be no phonics program that you can give them right this second in their developmental stage. No phonics program as good as reading aloud to them. Now, are you going to introduce phonics to them at some point? Sure. Now, if you have a child that's already reading and you're like, well, I'm already reading to them and they want more. Okay, if the child is asking for more, fine. Give them a little bit more. And we can talk about some gentle things that you can do that don't involve you going out and buying a bunch of curriculums. If you want to, if the child is desiring to learn more or to read more. Or let's say they're already reading, right? We'll talk about that at the end. But for now, if your child doesn't read, you need to be reading to them again and again and again, day in and day out. Beautiful stories. Let their imaginations go wild. Okay, that's the first thing that you need to do. Is that. Oh, and then in the book, The Smartest, I actually want to reinforce this. This is from The Smartest Kids in the World by Amanda Ripley, and how they got that way. She says, by contrast, other parental efforts yielded big returns. The survey suggested when children were young, parents who read to them every day or almost every day had kids who performed much better in reading all around the world by the time they were 15. It sounded like a public service cliche. Read to your kids. Could it be that simple? Yes, it could. Which was not to say that it was uninteresting. After all, what did reading to your kids mean? Well, done well, it meant teaching them about the world, sharing stories from faraway places, about smoking volcanoes and little boys who were sent to bed without dinner. It meant asking them questions about the book, questions that encouraged them to think for themselves. It meant sending a signal to kids about the importance of not just reading, but of learning about all kinds of new things. Okay, also fantastic book, Smartest Kids in the World. All the books that I refer to, all the studies, I'm going to be in the show notes. So if you want to look them up yourself, you can. So number one, you're going to read to your kids. You're going to read and you're going to read and you're going to read and you're going to read. The second thing, and by the way, they're going to love it because kids naturally love stories. Shoot, as adults, we love stories, don't we? I love stories, and I'm almost 48 years old. Okay, so that's the first thing. Mamas of young babies. That's the first thing you're going to do. And if you've got little babies right now, then start reading to them now if you haven't already. Start with Goodnight Moon. Start with Where the Wild Things Are. Start with Sandra Boynton books. Barnyard Dance. Okay? Start, read and read and read and let their imaginations go wild. The second thing that you are going to do is you are going to let them play. Now let's talk about why you're going to let them play and play and play. And we're going to actually talk about different kinds of play. We're going to talk about imaginative play, creative play, active play, and then simple board games. Okay? So we're going to talk about those kinds of play and what they entail. I love this. Fred Rogers, good old Mr. Rogers, said play is often talked about as if it were a relief from serious learning. But for children, play is serious learning. Play is really the work of childhood, right? Children do not see play as frivolous. They see it as great work. Now, there has been a lot of research done on the effect of play on children. I love this is the book Free to Learn by Dr. Peter Gray. Now, I have an early podcast episode where I interviewed Dr. Gray, and whoa, blew my mind. It would be worthwhile for you to go back and listen to that episode. I will link that and that as well as the reading podcast in the show notes if you want to look those up. But this is what Dr. Peter Gray says. And he is a developmental and evolutionary biologist. And this is what he says. He teaches at Boston College. Play serves the serious purpose of education, but the player is not deliberately educating himself or herself. The player is playing for fun. Education is a byproduct. If the player were playing for a serious purpose, it would no longer be play, and much of the educative power would be lost. Now, he talks about risk and why play is so important to children. Because the child at play is not worrying about his or her future, and because the child at play suffers no real-world consequences for failing, the child at play is not afraid of failure. The playing child feels free to try things out in a pretend world that would be too risky or impossible to try in the serious world. Because the child at play is not seeking approval from adult judges, the child is unhampered by evaluation concerns. Fear and concerns about evaluation tends to freeze the mind and body into rigid frames suitable for carrying out well-learned habitual activities, but not for learning or thinking or about anything new. In the absence of concern about failure and other judgments, children at play can devote all their attention to the skills at which they are playing. They strive to perform well because performing well is an intrinsic goal of play, but they know if they fail, there will be no serious real-world consequences. Okay, then he goes on to talk about sociodramatic play, of which that's also called imaginative play. Children who engage in more sociodramatic play have, by various measures, been shown to demonstrate more empathy and more ability to understand what another person thinks, knows, or desires than do children who engage in less. Moreover, several short-term experiments conducted in preschools have shown that when some children are provided with extra opportunity to engage in sociodramatic play and others are not, those in the extra play groups later exhibit higher performance on various measures of social perspective taking and ability to get along with others than do those in the control groups. Okay, fabulous book if you haven't read it, Free to Learn by Dr. Peter Gray. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about imaginative play and what things constitute imaginative play. Again, we're going to talk about imaginative play, creative play, active play, and then some simple board games. And then for those of you who just want to ignore everything I've just said and push academic learning, I'm going to give you some gentle ways and gentle things you can do to include academics if you feel so guilty. Okay. And I say that with all of the love in my heart for you. I see you and I hear you, and I want your hearts to be put at rest. I don't mean to come across so harsh to you mamas, because I know you are so well-intending, and I know your hearts are in the right place, and you only want the best thing for your kids. So, with that, imaginative play. Imaginative play develops motor skills, fosters social interaction. And so here are some great imaginative play options. Building blocks, just plain old boring blocks. Dress up, simple dress up clothes. Pretend play with dolls, action figures, stuffies. Outdoor play. And simple board games. Okay. Oftentimes, when I was a child in my kindergarten class, we didn't do a lot of formal academics. As a matter of fact, I didn't learn to read until first or second grade. First grade, we started reading. Second grade, I nailed it down. But one of the things that I think a lot of kindergarten classes are missing are play kitchens and, other areas where they can pretend to be fixing a car or they're building something. And I think sometimes we tend to buy too many toys for our kids when really our kids do better with less than with more. There was this cool study, and I wish I could find it again. I'm going to have to look for it. So if it's not in the show notes, no, I couldn't find it, and I probably shouldn't be referencing it, but I'm going to anyway. But there was a study done in a classroom where they took away all of the toys for these young children. And they were like kindergarten age, took away all of the toys, all of them. Do you want to guess what happened? Blew me away. The kids started using their seats and other things to do imaginative play. And they found that the kids got more creative, not less creative, when they took all of the toys away. Now, I'm not saying take all of your kids' toys away, but I am saying if you have a bunch of extra toys and electronics and, all these toys, go through and weed them out, get rid of them. Early on, my boy's therapist, now, when I got married, I took on 2 children right away. And when my husband and I got married, they were 5 and 7. Sorry, no, 4 and 7. And they had a million toys. Like, they had so many toys. And their therapist, because it was a divorce situation, and anyway, hard situation, we had them in therapy, and their therapist said, get rid of most of their toys, because children get really, really overwhelmed and overstimulated with too many things. And so we did. We kept the imaginative toys and then a couple of their favorite things, and that's it. And I noticed that they started thriving more with less, which is kind of counterintuitive. But what happens is when they have too many choices, it overwhelms a child. Just like when our houses are too cluttered, it overwhelms our brains. Same principle. So some ideas for plays, for toys that you can get some dress-up clothes. Simple, just a couple. Like, you don't need a million. A couple dresses or a chef hat, or, a cape, or a couple, you could do a couple capes and a couple hats. And maybe if you have a little girl, a princess dress. And I even moved away from doing like Disney princess dresses. Like I am a sewer. So I sewed, my daughter really wanted a Red Riding Hood cape a couple years ago. So I sewed her a little Red Riding Hood cape and then made her a couple simple dresses. And one was like a little pioneer dress. And she loved them. Very simple things, but get rid of just keep a few dress up things. Building blocks are your friends, y'all. Legos are your friends. Beautiful with imaginative play. Simple dolls. Growing up, I had a million Barbies. I have since gotten rid of I found that my girls didn't love Barbies. And so but what they did love is they loved the little animal dolls. You know which ones I'm talking about? Like Calico Critters. I'm trying to remember the other name of them. But we found that the little rabbit families were beloved by my children. And so we had like a rabbit family and a bear family. And as a child, I had a bear family that I still have, that my girls occasionally will get out and love to play with. Well, my younger daughter now, my older daughter, not so much. But those dolls enable hours of play. We have a few stuffed animals, and there will be times that I go upstairs where our playroom is, and there's my 9-year-old playing with her tea set and her stuffed animals around. I ended up getting rid of a lot of the food for the play kitchen because there was so much of it. It was overwhelming, and that eliminated some amount of imaginative play, and I really wanted her to focus more on it. So I got rid of a lot of the play food, and we just kept a few of her favorite play food pieces. And then she started coming up with other play food on her own, which then sparked that imaginative play. So let them use different things. You don't always have to give them like, oh, they're pretending that to be sawing. I should get them a real saw. Now, when they're older, you're going to want to get real real tools for them. But when they're little, allow them to use different found objects to play with. It's brilliant. It enriches their imagination, and they need that. This is a serious business for them. It helps them make connections with the world. Okay, so that's imaginative play. Number 2, creative play. Get out finger paints, coloring books, Play-Dohs, really good tactile, especially if you have children with sensory issues. Play-Doh, having rice with little figurines in it, little butterflies and little dinosaurs and little things like that, or little found objects like shells, put them in rice and let them get that tactile experience. Legos, simple crafts. Those are all part of creative play when they can create something. Let's talk about active play. Children need sensory input. Now, as a mom with a child with sensory issues, I found that she especially needs to be climbing and swinging and sliding, dancing, running and chasing, and playing running and chasing games. Like they need that sensory input. They need the outdoors. They need outdoor exploration. I also have a podcast episode where I talk about the importance of being nurtured by nature, that children, it reduces anxiety. It reduces a lot of cortisol in our system when we are outside and amongst trees and the natural world. So it's important to get them outside and playing in the natural world and feeling that sensory input and feeling the wind on their face and jumping. And by the way, one of the things that happens is as they take risks in their play, it enables them to regulate and self-regulate. And children desperately need to learn self-regulation, something that they don't get in school because recesses have been cut out so much. And these poor teachers of young children don't get as much recess time because the academics are being pushed so young. And yet these children need the recess. They need to be outside. They need to be moving their little bodies. Okay, and then some other things you can do. Simple board games such as matching, Go Fish, Candyland. Just doing simple games, tic-tac-toe, right? Simple board games are really great for the mind and for the imagination for children, and it enables them to play with you. Okay, so those are the two things that you need to do. You need to read with your kids. Number one. And number two, you need to let them have lots and lots and lots and lots of playtime. So much playtime. Okay, so for those of you that are still like, but I still want to do more with my kids. Those of you who want to be overachievers, and you're well-intending, here are some things you can do. If you are dead set on teaching them, don't buy any formal curriculums. Number one, they're expensive or can be. And number two, I find that they kill love of learning pretty fast. Okay. If you are insistent on teaching your children math, here are some things you can do. You can count with them. You can do simple addition or subtraction. You could talk to them about adding or taking away small quantities or small objects. You can explain terms like this is more and this is less. And again, these are very, right, there's no set curriculum with this. You're just explaining things to them. You could use visual aids like number lines or pictures to help them visualize numbers and operations. You can play counting games with them, like how many. You can ask them to count how many objects are on the plate in a toy box or in a picture. You could play I Spy with My Little Eye, something with 3 legs. You can roll and count, and you can roll a dice and then have them count how many are on that dice. You can cook together, and you can count the eggs. You can measure ingredients while explaining concepts like half or a full cup. You can build with blocks. We're back to blocks. It's always the boring stuff that ends up being the best. And you can count how many blocks there are in the towers that they build. You can have them sort objects by shape and color. Again, that's not formal curriculum, but it does enable them to start to see patterns and be able to sort things. You can play tic-tac-toe and use numbers instead of symbols. You can play bingo and create a little bingo card with numbers. You can play guess the number. I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 10. Oh, go higher or go lower. Just make sure that if you are doing that as formal learning, that there's kind of a rule of thumb if you're doing formal learning with a child. And that is, it's their age plus 1 is how long you have to do the formal learning with them. So if you've got a 5-year-old, they're 5 plus 1 equals 6. So you've got 6 minutes. Now, if they really are loving the game and they see it as play and as a game, then keep going with them. But the second that you start to see them get annoyed, that it's okay to stop, because remember, play is how they're learning. And if they stop seeing something as playful, you're not gonna get very far. Okay, so that's for math ideas. If you really, really, really are worried about them learning and you're concerned. Okay, for reading and writing, one of the best things, and actually this comes from Julie Bogart, who created the Brave Writer program, and I love this. She calls this the jot it down phase. When they're little, rather than pushing them to write, what you do is when they tell you a story or they share something with you, you jot it down, you write it down, and then you reread it to them. They get so delighted when that happens. Okay. So that's called the jot it down phase, where they tell you a story, you jot it down and you save it and you share it with them. And you don't have to share it with them right then. You could share it with them later. You could, if you're like really like, no, I really feel bad and people are pressuring me and I don't know what to do and I want them to start writing, then you can show them how to print their first and last name. You can have them draw pictures that tell a story. Remember, their fine motor skills are still lacking, and things that you want to do things that will help their fine motor skills. That's why like doing sensory buckets is really great, because they have to pick up the little objects and it helps their fine motor skills. You could have them draw the picture and tell a story, and then you write down the story. Once again, that jot it down, where they tell the story. You can show them how to write upper and lowercase letters, although if they write, they may not clearly write. And some kids really enjoy writing. So yeah, if they're enjoying it, then by all means, encourage it. You could do writing activities like put shaving cream all over your table and then have them draw the letters in the shaving cream. That's always really fun. Then it becomes play for them. You could do finger stamping, where you take a stamp pad and you take their little fingers and they stamp out the letters or the shapes of the letters. Another fun thing you could do is take a can of water and a big paintbrush, and on a hot day, go out and have them draw the letters with the paintbrush on the sidewalk or on the driveway, because it's going to dry anyway, but that way they can see the letters and then they can see it evaporate. So those are just a few things that you can do with your kids. If you're like, no, I need to do something formal with them, that's a very gentle way to introduce formal academics without it being overwhelming to your child, and where it still feels like play. Now, I'll include the things that I've suggested as a PDF in the show notes. So if you want to download that, you are welcome to it. And that way you have something to reference. But my young friends, my young moms, you are so well-intending. Let your children play. Read to them and let them play. And I promise there will be a time for formal learning. But don't push it too soon. Don't make them hate learning because of your own fears of inadequacy, that you're not doing enough. Again, ages 3 to 6, read to them, let them play, and introduce simple things in a fun way. And then if they really ask for more things, that's the only time that you're going to give more, is if they ask for it, if they want more, if they're pushing for more, then give them more. My young, sweet friends, I know you're well-intended, and I think you're doing better than you think you are. With that, you got this. If this was helpful to you, please subscribe to our newsletter in the show notes below at schooltohomeschool.com. And also, please join our Facebook group, School to Homeschool. Like and subscribe.